Hi, I'm Polly Lit. Don't worry about it. So, in October of last year, I posted a video called Queer People Don't Exist in Number 6, where I kind of just spitballed my thoughts about queer identity in the story. My main thought was that if people don't acknowledge any difference in being straight or gay, cis or not, then queer people don't exist. I've had a lot more thoughts about it since then, so I wanted to restate my case, but in a scripted way that actually makes sense and that aligns more with what I think now. In this video, I'm going to be using the term queer and LGBT+, differently. LGBT will be used to stand in for anyone who is not cis, het, or allo. This will really only matter for our two main boys, seeing as they show attraction to / are involved romantically with each other, and Inukashi, who is shown to be AFAB yet not identify with any particular gender. Queer is going to refer to the adoption of identities that fall outside of the norm of the society that is lived in. With that out of the way, let's get into my actual thoughts. This is my little yellow notebook that I wrote my thoughts down in when I first thought of this video. And the first thing I wrote, word for word, is this. The existence of queer people requires the existence of non-queer people. Think about it yourself. What makes people queer? It means that they're LGBT, right? And you'd be right in the society we live in. However, that's an idea our society is socially constructed. A little bit after I made the original video, I read an excellent book by Mark McClelland called Queer Japan from the Pacific War to the Internet Age. It talked about the history of gay, lesbian, and trans people in Japan, but also the history of BDSM and prostitution. There was a special magazine that especially specialized in different kinks. Did you want to see bondage, or did you want to see two women going at it? They were all lumped together in the category of sexual perversion, and so it didn't really matter what kind of perversion they were. What we consider queer in America may not be the same as what is considered queer where you are. In mid-century Japan, what was considered perverted or queer was not solely defined by who the attraction was to, but also your practices. Sadomasochism is just as queer as being bisexual or trans. However, queerness also requires community. Really, why do my asexuality and my agenderism have to do anything with each other? Why are they both queer? It's because our society has decided that we want to categorize them both as queer and to form a shared identity around those smaller identities. The reason we as Americans group LGBT people together and call us queer is for a few different reasons. A, the reason we're all grouped together is because lots of LGBT folk, even of very different identities, suffer from oppression, and so we work together in order to make sure even those who are different from us have community and protection. B, the reason we chose the word queer is because it means strange, and the community we have formed centers around the oppressed, and those who the outside cis-hetero world deemed queer, strange, other, and decided to outcast. But what about number 6? I think there are two reasons that queer people don't exist in number 6, even if people with non-cis-het-allo practices do. As I said in my little yellow notebook, the existence of queer people requires the existence of non-queer people, and also a tension between these two groups. There is no tension. There's no tension between LGBT and straight people in number 6. In the West Bloc, nobody has time for bigotry. They're all just doing what they can to get by. And in the city, there isn't any conflict at all. It's supposed to be a utopian, egalitarian paradise, where no one fights over equal rights because everybody is already equal. I'll get back to number 6's city a bit later, but I want to touch on my second point first, which is that 2. The idea of queer people as an umbrella term requires a queer community, and the world of number 6 has no community. Both the city and the West Bloc are highly individualist. It's every man for himself, a fact everyone admits in the West Bloc, and a fact covered up and ignored in number 6. You cannot have queer people without a queer community, and there's no community in this world. No one will be heading out to drag shows or setting up a pride parade or fighting back against non-existent hate. The second point also ties into a seeming lack of queer cultural symbols in number 6. Examples of queer cultural symbols are pride flags, or dressing alternatively, or being into musical theatre. Nothing about these things are inherently LGBT, but can signal to others that you are a member of the alphabet mafia. Nezumi may be a theatre kid and Shion may wear sweater vests, but nothing about the way they're written feels like these are queer symbols. They're just neutral facts about the characters, and we have no reason to believe that there are queer cultural symbols used by other LGBT people because there's no queer culture, because there's no queer community. What's critical in understanding all of this is that LGBT people do exist in number 6. This sounds obvious after all. Doesn't the story focus heavily on the relationship between two boys? A relationship that's pretty romantic at times? And yes, of course, LGBT people exist in number 6. But they're also recognized as not exactly the standard. In Volume 2, Shion gets sexually harassed by a prostitute who is very irritated by his lack of interest in her, saying, "Come on, you're a man, aren't you?" Eventually, when Nezumi comes along, we get this description. The woman drew her chin up and smiled thinly in realization. "I see, no wonder I was getting such a slow reaction. Sweetie here isn't interested in women." This is a fact that Shion protests, but Nezumi speaks over him, covering Shion's mouth so that he can just pretend Shion is gay and get away from the woman. However, it's crucially important to recognize that the fact that the word gay is never used. Not once in the series is LGBT-ness used as an identity. Shion isn't described as gay or bi or pan. He just happens to like a guy. Inukashi isn't described as non-binary or agender or transmasc. They're just who they are. This doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't or can't describe the characters in number 6 with LGBT terms. I frequently do it so myself. It's just important to note that neither queerness nor being LGBT is seen as an identity marker in any way. This applies in both Volume 4 when Rikika is talking with Fura, and in Volume 1 where Safu asks, "Because you're not interested in me? Or interested in sex?" Which in the anime got changed to interested in women. LGBT people are allowed to exist, but are never defined by an identity. They just exist as they are. Which, sounds sort of like a queer paradise, doesn't it? There's no expectation to label yourself or other yourself from society. That's a good thing. But the society they live in is still extremely heteronormative. This is the thing I said I was going to come back to. From the prostitute's comment, "You're a man, aren't you?" to Safu's immediate assumption that Shion must be asexual if he didn't want to sleep with her, to everything that is the side story of Promise for the Day After Tomorrow. There's a very clear role that men and women are supposed to fall into. Women are sex objects and men are pursuers. Rikika shows us the perfect example of this in Volume 2. In the scene he's introduced, we get a brief description of his porno magazine being filled with naked women and half-naked men. We're immediately shown that women are objectified more heavily than men are. Rikika is also a pimp, and the prostitutes that work for him seem to be entirely women with an entirely male customer base. This also isn't a view that is perpetrated only by the cishet characters. Nezumi is shown mocking Shion for his lack of sexual experience and his missing of social cues when it comes to talking with women. In the side story I mentioned earlier, Nezumi and Inukashi try to pressure Shion into sleeping with a woman he has no interest in, because it's seen as too shameful that he is at the decrepit age of 16 and is still a virgin. Basically, my point is that the patriarchy is still going on strong in number 6, no matter how much it pretends it's not. And this doesn't even address gender. We know no one cares about Inukashi being genderqueer in the West Block, but what about the city? They probably lack gender-affirming care, especially for those outside of Kronos, and I simply can't imagine that it's easy to socially transition, because as it's already established, queer people don't exist. Inukashi gets to not be cis because they grew up largely alone and outside of society, so they never had any purpose for gender or anyone to enforce gender onto them. But for citizens, it's not going to be the same. LGBT people may not be oppressed by violence or hate in number 6, but they are ignored and have less rights than others. For example, we know anyone can get married to anyone else as long as they're adults, so the narration does fail to mention if gay relationships are included in that anyone. But can you be married to multiple people? Is polyamory allowed? Do you have to be married to someone to have kids with them? We know that artificial insemination is heavily controlled by the government, and there are a lot of restrictions on it. Is one of those restrictions the gender or sex of the people who will be raising the child? These are questions we never get the answer to. The characters in number 6 live in a society that doesn't hate LGBT people, but doesn't acknowledge them. It's this purgatory where queer people aren't hated nor supported due to the fact that they don't exist.